Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest narration in the web series History of the Soul War. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 3. Humans Don't Die Easily. The lecturer watched his class, apprehensive and excited. They'd done their research this time, and the conclusion they'd come to was that humans were insane. My part of this lecture will be rather short, he explained, and twitched his antennae, conveying his pleasure at not actually having to prepare anything for this topic. He opened the presentation, and the UV lights dimmed. Most Federation species cannot survive the loss of a limb through violence. Our species will lose too much fluid and become unable to move, as well as going into shock. The Orcs have significant issues due to their breathing orifices being on their upper arms. The Ordeed would simply lose hydraulic pressure and collapse. And with their diffuse nerve system and brain, the Scythans would suffer brain damage. Humans, however, keep going. He moved on to the next slide, an image of a human missing an upper limb, seeming to be taking part in some kind of physical competition against other humans who were not lacking such limbs. Personally, I've seen humans with limbs missing continue fighting even while the wound is flesh. Humanity, being able to survive this, has developed various replacements for missing limbs. He moved on to the next slide. A collection of human prosthetics throughout the ages, starting with a simple hook all the way through to the more modern systems where the cybernetics were grafted to the nerves. A student raised his hands. Sir, is that a weapon? They replaced lost limbs with weapons? The student's voice shook, and his antennae were folded back in fear. The lecturer smiled, clicking in amusement. I think I should hand off to our guest lecturer, Colonel Gregor Vanaheim. The lecture hall was suddenly frozen. They'd all heard the stories, legends, really. The iron-hearted captain, the human with the steel soul. Some of the remaining religious organizations in the Federation had him down as some kind of blessed or cursed creature. Gregor Ironheart Vanaheim, the man who had led a squad of 20 men and crushed the Federation's lunar base without losing a single trooper. What they knew was shockingly not what they expected. A human with short white hair and a withered face. He looked late 60s. He wore a human military uniform, medals of honor pinned to it. Walking onto the stage from the side, they could only really see his left side. He looked utterly normal. Greeting the lecturer, he smiled, exchanged pleasantries, and then turned to face the assembled student recruits. There was a collective straightening of antennae in surprise and confusion. The upper right part of his face was metal. His eye was also artificial. It wasn't a normal artificial implant that simply looked like a normal eye, but rather had several complex lenses housed in a boxy structure. He didn't address the class right away, but rather took off his dress jacket. Under it, he wore a button-up shirt with short sleeves. The class at this point was leaning forward to get a better view. Both of his arms were mechanical, heavy with armor plating and clear mounting points for more, or possibly guns. The cybernetics disappeared into his sleeves. This was him. The man that was more metal than man. The ones closest to the front could see in the armor on his arms tiny marks, like the honor marks on the lecturer's carapace. They'd heard of this human ritual amongst human soldiers. Each tiny scratch was a foe the human had slain. A few recoiled, realizing that every surface had marks on it. Vanaheim spoke, and the spell was broken. The class, suddenly realizing that he was here to teach them, showed the appropriate amount of respect. To answer your question, yes. Humans often include extra things into their prosthetics, not just weapons. His tricle was fluent enough that they didn't need the universal translators. Still, his voice was gruff and jovial. For example, he tapped the prosthetic eye on its side, the clinking of metal loud in the silence. This allows me to see in the normal wavelengths of humans, the ultraviolet of he caught himself, tricle, as well as infrared. It has lots of other functions. He took the controls for the presentation and pressed a button. The next slide appeared. It looked to be a simple diagram of a human. To save questions, I'll answer them all here. Yes, I have a prosthetic heart. A flechette round took my old one. My lung as well. There was another ripple of shock. Humans could replace their hearts. Was there no part of the human that could simply replace with a machine? The eye was a near miss with a plasma weapon. The class could understand the damage, but at the same time, why would any creature continue fighting after that? It was insanity. I can't remember what took the limbs, at least what took which limb. One was lost to an ambush of some ordain during a Pan-Asian conflict. I know one leg was a particle gunshot. He paused and smiled at the class, seeming to enjoy the growing horror and fear that he was causing them. To most of them, any one of those ordeals would be career, if not life-ending. Yet, here he was standing before them, talking about them as if they were just what he'd had for the evening meal the day before. As he spoke, the diagram behind him lit up slowly, indicating areas on the kernel that had been replaced. A section of the head, all 4 limbs up to the main joints, his heart and left lung, a small section of his neck. Now, the topic I've been asked to teach you lot is humans and cybernetics during the Soul War. He tapped his fingers against the lectern, the rapid-fire thudding of metal on the plastic drawing attention back to the present. During what the Federation calls the Soul War, what we call the invasion of Earth, humans ended up facing an enemy that preferred to incapacitate rather than kill. At the time, we didn't know if this was some kind of irregular tactic to demoralize and overwhelm our support systems or what, but it meant we needed to find a solution. So we did what humans always do when we face something new. He smiled again. The students didn't like it when he smiled. They'd been told it was a display of friendly joy, but it reminded them far too much of the fact that the humans were predators. It also wasn't helped by the fact that the smile always came with a cold glare from one remaining eye. We came up with something new. Rather than just patching a trooper up and sending him home, we gave them bits that were stronger, faster, more reliable than normal human parts. He said and tapped his own arm. I was the first to volunteer for it. Had my arm replaced, then my heart. He said, looked around at the class. Turns out that normal humans can't keep up with an augmented trooper, so I got my own squad. Some general needed a name for us, so just use what my troops called me, Ironheart. We became the Ironheart Squad. He clicked onto the next slide. This one showed an image of a far younger-looking version of himself, along with 10 or so other men and women. It was set atop of what appeared to be a burnt-out Federation hover tank, in high spirits. Humans don't die, easy. We refuse to die. See, when we get into dangerous situations, our body gives us a drug called adrenaline. Means we can't feel pain. We can also run faster and are stronger. He explained. The class glanced at one another, worried. Human bodies made a drug that makes humans even more dangerous. What's next? So if you end up in a war with humans, make sure you kill them, or they'll keep coming back. Now, this was in the 2nd or 3rd year of the Soul War, so there was another 6 or so years of ground fighting to go. He waved at the image. I had not had both my arms upgraded back then, he chuckled. Now you see, humans have this thing. We can get angry, and we can yell and say stupid things at each other, but we won't stay angry. We'll get over it and get on with life. His voice changed. No longer was it gruff and jovial. It was cold and carried a weight of all he'd seen. But what the Federation did, you didn't make humans angry. You made us hate. Now for humans, hate is very different. See, when you make humans hate, it don't go away. It'll stay a long while, decades. The class was nervous, afraid. No one had actually told them what had happened, and none of them knew. But whatever it was, they knew it would never happen again. And humans stop caring about things when they hate. Things like their own safety, or even what is right or wrong. See, when humans really, properly hate, they'll go to the ends of the galaxy to get you. He straightened up and smiled. But it wasn't you, Tricle, that did it. It was the Torsek that made the mistake, he finished. The lecture hall was frozen again. Torsek, the only species in the Federation that no longer had an origin planet. Humanity had seen to it. The part of the story they knew. The Torsek had done something. They'd broken humanity's rules so badly that humanity had turned the Torsek homeworld into a ball of ash and rock. Gregor smiled again. Now, when you tell a man who hates his enemy and can no longer fight, you can let him fight again. You get a man who is in it for revenge, not just for himself, but for every wrong done to all of his people. That's why you get people like my troops. He moved on to the next slide. This appeared to be a diagram of a prosthetic arm. But it's been a good, 190 years? He paused. All's forgiven. Now, modern cybernetics. These tend to have more bells and whistles than mine, but as you can see, they mimic the human form pretty well. We've found that doing weird things like extra fingers or such confuses the brain. So it's normally just a human hand with an extra stuff activated from the outside. Or in specific situations, this one, he gestured at the side, has an interface port and a computer stored in it, used by the Boffins. He said, looking at the class, as they all looked a little shell-shocked from his somewhat mad lecture. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the Olympics. We used to have a rule saying that those with prosthetics wouldn't compete with those without, because those would be at a disadvantage. He laughed, a short, barking laugh. We had to change that, because now people without cybernetics would lose. The class knew the noise was supposed to indicate mirth, but they weren't sure why this was funny. Now, I don't have much more to say on the topic of cybernetics and the Soul War. I have plenty of stories, but those aren't really lectures. So, any questions? There was a long silence before one of the students spoke up.
Miss Arnholtz, what did the Torsek do? It doesn't say in the notes.
The student was pale, afraid that asking the question would earn another outburst from the old human. However, Gregor smiled and seemed to perk up. Smart question, kid. See, in human culture, you're not allowed to attack non-combatants, people who don't want to or can't fight, kids, injured and the like. Well, when your planet is under attack, you send them somewhere safe. He was cut off by the lecturer suddenly. That is a topic of another lecture. Any further questions can be sent via extranet to myself. I'll forward the relevant questions to the Commander Vanheim. After the 5th lecture, I'll be uploading a file with all questions answered. Questions will be anonymous. He turned to the Colonel. Thank you for providing this lecture. I believe it is human custom for the class to thank the guest. He asked and turned to the class. Please thank Colonel Vanheim for this lecture. In unison, the class thanked Gregor for teaching them. Gregor smiled, collecting his dress coat in the process. It was my pleasure, he told them. I'll be heading off then, he said, and walked back off the raised platform the way he'd come, letting them see one last time his cybernetic eye. Once Gregor was out of sight, the lecturer continued. I hope you all found that lecture illuminating. Continuing on from where the good colonel left off, humans are capable of surviving almost anything short of decapitation or destruction of several critical organs all at once. He swapped back to his own perspective. The next lecture will cover the chronology of the Soul War and the first meeting between Federation peacemakers and human ambassadors. Class dismissed.
I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Sevaren Serberous, Bushmaster 177, HenryTheRed, Casper Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Sevaren Serberous. Thank you very much.